Live from MMA Fighting Studios, this is Between the Links. And now, your host, Mike Heck.
The iconic voice of Esterlyn welcomes you to a brand new edition of BTL, and thank goodness for her introduction because I just had a coughing fit due to the allergies here. So it worked out. Thank you very much, Esther, for giving me a second to recover. But thank you for joining us. We have a lot to talk about this week, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get right into it and introduce the combatants. First, he's the challenger, and he already gets brownie points for showing up here on his day off. He's the Prince of Positivity, the co-host of On to the Next One and Tough Hang. He's my best friend, Emmett, and he's excited for the NBA draft. Alexander
Happy
K.
draft
Lee.
day, everyone.
AK?
Best
How
of luck to everyone. I'm great. I'm very excited. It's NBA draft day, one of my favorite days of the year. Best of luck to all of you. May your picks be superstars and not busts nor lemons. Very excited.
Are you optimistic that they will draft well?
Listen, number 13 pick, Kobe Bryant, Karl Malone, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker. I'm just saying, it's got a better hit rate than some of the top picks in the top 10, so I am excited. Number 13, Masai. Bobby, don't let me down.
Yes, the Celtics traded Marcus Smart. Don't know how I feel. We'll see what happens. But making his first title defense, ladies and gentlemen, is the man with the best theme song in MMA. And I have to say, after Tuesday's edition of Heck of a Morning, he might have overtaken Jed as the new Mr. Hot Take. He is the BTL champion. He is New York Rick. Hello, sir. How are you?
Mike, it's a pleasure to be here as always. It's also my day off, coincidentally, but there's no place I'd rather be than with you guys. I've even put on my glasses just so I can experience this as clearly as I possibly can and see you guys as perfectly as I can, because there's no better way to spend the time. So I want to see your beautiful faces. Casey, Alex, Mike, you guys are the best.
The ultimate baby face. Incredible stuff. So very positive introductions, and let's just get into this thing because we usually like to stay on this trend. We like to start with some fun stuff, maybe a recap, some more positivity, but unfortunately, first question, first topic, not really how that's going to play out today because since we last had this program, and I believe this story broke like minutes after last week's show ended, Conor McGregor is back in the news, the former two-division UFC champion, and it's not for good reasons. He is being accused of sexually assaulting a woman in Miami after Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Of course, we all remember what happened during the game, just cracking the mascot and putting the damn dude in the hospital. But this is a totally different discussion. TMZ first reported the news, then released a couple of videos they received over the coming days after, showing McGregor and the accuser together, and McGregor and his team have vehemently denied these allegations. The investigation is still ongoing. There are no charges filed thus far, whether it's civil or from a criminal perspective. So New York Rick, obviously a lot to unpack here. These are allegations, like I mentioned, no charges, and I know we need to be careful with how we word all of this, but how did you react to this news? Because we basically just wrapped BTL, and then minutes later, here we go.
Yeah, it would be irresponsible to kind of speculate on any of the actions that actually occurred. Right now, it's just allegations. As you mentioned, no charges filed. Conor McGregor seems to be proceeding with his life as normal based on continuing to post to social media accounts. So we really don't know what is going to play out here. But my reaction to the news itself was, unfortunately, here we go again. Like it at this point seems like this is the nature of what you're getting with Conor McGregor. It seemed to me for a moment, the fact that they were able to wrangle him in for tough made me think maybe we're turning the corner. Maybe he can be focused and keep himself out of trouble and get into the cage and fight. But there's time between that tough taping and the time that they have to fight, and it appears to be too much. When Conor McGregor is idle, it does not appear that good things happen, and you know there's no way to make light of something this the accusations here. There's nothing. Even though it feels like this happens all the time, it does not mean that allegations like this can be just swept aside. There's a very serious allegation being made, and obviously, there's still a lot to be played out. But unfortunately, yes, it does feel to me like just another one of these situations for Conor McGregor. Unfortunately,
AK, what do you think of all this? I mean, you're our boots on the ground virtually for The Ultimate Fighter. You've been watching McGregor coach and all of that, and then this news comes out, and it's pun intended, it's tough hang, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, there was so much doubt around the McGregor Chandler match happening, even at when the season was first announced. Everyone thought it was a great idea to have them coach. Everyone thought, oh, this is a pretty logical comeback fight for McGregor. Chandler had essentially spoken it into existence. He had been, go to MMAfighting.com or Google MMAfighting.com and look up like Chandler McGregor. He did at least like 4 or 5 different interviews, tweets, whatever, just public comments saying McGregor's fight's going to happen. McGregor comes back. I'm the guy for it. And it's not that people didn't believe him. It's just like, we thought there were other options. And then when Chandler finally landed it, everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Other people were booked. Like, this is the right fight for him to come back to. So it seemed like the perfect opportunity. And I had said on Tough Hang, like, man, the show is doing like a really decent job of trying to sort of rehabilitate Conor's image. 1, he's been away from so long. 2, he has all past, crimes and allegations. I mean, he still has a huge legion of fans, but I do feel like there was some sort of cracks in that fan base starting to form, and especially among the more casual set who aren't like complete Conor McGregor sycophants. If Ultimate Fighter 31, if they tuned in and kind of saw a random episode, oh, look at him, he's paying a kid for these custom action figures, what a nice guy, look at him spending time with these up and coming fighters. I thought it was like they were trying to rehab his image and doing a decent job of it. Last Thursday, this whole story just explodes, and everything I said just looks insanely foolish. So, listen, it's horrible news for obvious reasons, and also for fight fans who were hoping to see Conor McGregor back in action, want to see this Chandler fight. Mike, I will say this: I had said at the beginning of the year, I think we had been asked over under Jon Jones McGregor fights, and it was like 1.5, and I went under because I thought it was going to be 0. Then Jon Jones fought, and I was like, oh boy. Now I'm in trouble. I'm looking pretty safe again. I was going to say, I don't know Jon Jones and McGregor fight again this year, so I feel pretty good about that prediction now.
All right. I mean, we can't really throw out hypotheticals with all of this, so we have to wait and just see how this all plays out legally. But, AK, no matter how this goes, and you mentioned it with the casual audience and the cracks in the fan foundation, if Conor is being tried in the court of public opinion, this is not a good look being in these headlines, and it happens over and over again. And this whole thing, as you mentioned, just has cast another shadow on this return to the octagon and a potential fight with fellow Tough 31 coach Michael Chandler. So gymnastic scale, AK, gymnastic scale for the faith you have right now that Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler happens in 2023.
Oh, it's at like a 1.5 to I don't know how it's going to happen. We didn't even mention, I meant to say it. I'm sure we're all thinking about it. The USADA stuff as well. Everyone's reported pretty widely that he does not appear to be back in the system. There's certainly a possibility that the USADA stuff doesn't matter. I can't remember who said it, but there's like someone could say, "Oh yeah, he's been tested. We just didn't update his profile, or whatever. He's been tested." Or there's the UFC's. They can do the what's the word? Give an exemption for extraordinary circumstances. They've done it before, of course, most famously for Brock Lesnar. I'm not entirely sure what the circumstance could be, other than the UFC deciding, like, listen, we really want to make some more money this year, so please let McGregor fight. I know it sounds cynical, but listen, the USADA works with the UFC. I'm not saying the USADA lets the UFC do whatever they want, but I'm saying there's legalese, there's language that could be unearthed that we could totally say, yep, USADA decided for some reason McGregor fight. But I don't think that's going to happen. That's the cynical side of me talking. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we see that fight this year. So I'm at like a 1.5, really low that it happens. And I think I can't remember if I raised this question. I think I raised on Tough Hang this week. I do want to ask you guys, New York Rick as well, especially, what do you think the chances are the fight happens ever? Forget this year. Just is this fight just done now?
Rick?
Yeah, I think that's a more fair question because, to be honest, I'm wondering, like, is Conor McGregor going to get his life in order more so than is Conor McGregor going to fight? Like, fighting is like one of the furthest things from my mind when it comes to him because, okay, he gets in the USADA pool and they announce the date of Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. Now what? What happens in the months between? Like, there's just no certainty when it comes to Conor McGregor and his behavior when he's not literally just standing in the cage. Outside of that, it seems to be unmanaged and out of control. So don't have high hopes of him fighting this year at all. Don't think that's a possibility. Is he ever going to fight again? Can he get himself back in that space and be disciplined to that level is, I think, a real question, is a legitimate question. And I'm not sure that the answer is yes. So it remains to be seen and we'd need to see it. But I'm more concerned about, like, can this guy be a functioning member of society, let alone, fighting again? There's a lot that needs to be proven from Conor McGregor's side before I think about fights at all.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I think one big difference about this, and a lot of other people have mentioned, is like this happened in the United States. Not to say that there's like him doing it these other sexual assault allegations that occurred outside of the U.S. One of them, I think there was a couple. I want to say that there's at least one in Dublin, maybe a couple. One off the coast of Corsica, if I remember correctly. So that's near France. This is the first time it's happened on U.S. soil. And I think more importantly that there's some sort of video at least tying him to the accuser. Again, this video does not by any means conclusively prove the allegations, but this is the most public can see the evidence situation that we have had with when it comes to these sexual assault allegations. So, and again, and it also first happens in the U.S. So this is like anyone who thinks that that this can just be shrugged off. I think that's ridiculous. I'm not saying that this is not going to get settled out of court. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is settled financially and everyone just goes their separate ways. But that does not, again, as Rick has said, does not sort of dismiss the severity of the situation here. I do think these are the most serious charges he's faced yet. And while I do think that he will end up fighting again, and I do think people will find a way to embrace him again if he does fight. This is the cynical side of me talking again. It's never felt more bleak that Conor McGregor can come back from something, I think.
Look, Dana White has not reacted to any of this yet. He was not at the Apex card last week. I would assume he's going to be in Jacksonville on Saturday speaking with the media. I'll be there. I'm sure he's going to talk about this for the first time, but Greg, you said something really interesting. Can this man get his life together? And not only that, it's just the amount of time between obligations when it comes to the fight game. Like you put so much space in between. It's tough when we have all this money and you have all this fame and you're being pulled in all these different directions, all these different ventures and endeavors that he's a part of and all these businesses. The dude is all over the place. So keeping that in mind, Greg, when Dana is asked about this, and look, he's the biggest star in the history of the sport. This is a business. What are your thoughts on them just like benching him? Because yeah, you want the man to get his life together, but is benching him the right answer considering he kind of needs something to work towards, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult position from the UFC's perspective because, again, like if they enact a punishment of some sort, a benching of some sort, it looks like they are backing the allegations or like co-opting the allegations and saying like something untoward happened here. If there's a situation where Conor McGregor is free and clear and didn't need to be benched, it would give off bad optics and it's dicey. It's messy for the UFC. I think they will likely, and Dana White would be smart to take the approach of, hey, we have to see how this plays out legally, and then we will make a decision from there. I don't think that they can get ahead of it or do anything proactive. There's certain steps that I think have already played out, right? Like, for example, if this was an allegation that they took to the highest possible degree of seriousness and order, maybe Tough would have had some kind of statement, or maybe Tough would have paused airing or something to that effect. they can't do that. They can't proactively get ahead of that without, making some kind of determination there. So I think that they have to take a hands-off approach. I think that they have to kind of wait to see how things play out and then determine what they're going to do. From there, if Conor McGregor ends up not suffering any consequences or penalty, would it make sense for the UFC to just sit him out? Probably not. He's a moneymaker. At that point, what is the point of having him on your roster if you're not going to use him? But I think he personally has an obligation to kind of, figure out what's going on here, correct certain things in his life, and then think about fighting again after that.
Yeah. And let me just be clear. When I say bench, I don't mean like we're guilty until proven innocent. What I mean is just stay home, chill out, do what you got to do to like stay out of the spotlight for a while. And, maybe you just need that in your life. You just need a little separation from everything you have going on. It's not, condemning any action or anything like that. It's just, listen, we care about this guy. This guy's getting pulled in a million different directions. We just need him to settle down a little bit, let him calm down, and then we'll figure something out. But last thing before we move on, AK, you gave a gymnastics score, and then you gave a gymnastics score, but whether or not Conor Chandler happens this year. And then you posed a counter question of Conor ever fighting again or Conor Chandler ever fighting again. Gymnastics score for McGregor fighting ever again.
I mean, in MMA or
he
boxing,
fights again.
anything. Bare knuckle, anything?
Well, I mean, dude, look, if he's not fighting in the UFC, he's not fighting anywhere. So the UFC ain't going to let that dude fight anywhere else with fights on his contract.
If we're talking ever again, I could see some circumstance where somehow he gets dragged out to fight somewhere. You're right. He does have to deal with jump through hoops with the UFC. There's still money to be made off this guy. This is the life we live, right? This is the business we're talking about. There's still a lot of money to be made off him. If we're talking, will he ever fight like one more time? I'm at like a 9.8. Like I'm nearly certain he will fight somewhere again. You're right. It probably has to be in the UFC, but I don't know. As much as we've assessed the severity of these allegations and this whole situation, and just where the direction that his life seems to be going in. Man, the fight business is ever forgiving. I mean, Jon Jones did some pretty rough stuff not long before coming back this year. Now he's nominated for 2 ESPYs. And we're talking about him fighting Stipe and this horrible thing that happened in Las Vegas after the Hall of Fame, talking about Jon Jones. We're all aware of it. It certainly gets mentioned, but it's become so secondary to just talking about Jones's fighting career again. I can absolutely see the same happening with Conor McGregor. So I'm like a 9.8. I stopped short of 10 just because there's nothing's guaranteed, but you're going to see Conor McGregor fight again.
What do you think, New York Rick? I mean, I only bring this up because that is a very popular sentiment on the social media world. See, McGregor's never fighting again. I told you so.
Yeah. I think he will fight again. I think there's a world where, as AK said, he said it perfectly. Like the fight game is very forgiving when it comes to this type of thing. If there's still interest in seeing you fight fans will figure out how to find it, and promoters will figure out how to put it on. So yeah, I think Conor McGregor will fight again. And again, I think that's a bit of a dire. It would be a very dire statement to say Conor McGregor will never fight again based on this specific incident, right? It comes on the heels of this specific incident because there's still a lot of ambiguity. There's still a lot we don't know, and there's still a lot to play out here. So it would feel presumptive to do that. But yeah, there's certainly a trend of when Conor McGregor has free time here, things don't go well. So I understand that sentiment. I understand that wave, but I do expect that Conor McGregor will fight again. I can't imagine that he just walks away.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. Let's move on. It's like almost not even right to give a point here, but I got to do it. That's the job. So point for round 1 goes to... Give it to AK. He's the Prince of Positivity and my best friend. That's just... I didn't want to give a point, but
it's biased. Listen, you're biased. Anyway. Yeah, listen, you're biased. That's we all know it, and I love it. That's what I love about you.
Yes. Well, let's transition. Let's head to this past weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. We had a lot of events. We had the UFC Vegas 275 card. We had Bellator 297 on Friday. We also had the PFL card. Bellator had a very good card on paper. PFL had PFL 5, which obviously had some aftermath. We'll get into that in a moment. So I will ask you, AK. You're a man of the people. You're a man who studies the metrics. You know what's going on. You got your finger on the pulse, my man. And I'm not talking about the fights per se, but just like all the criteria involved in trying to answer this question. Who won last weekend, AK? Was it the UFC, Bellator, or PFL? And let me counter that as well. Who lost the weekend between the three?
Oh, wow. I would thought it would be all positivity. I don't want to say someone lost. We're all winners. We can all be winners in this crazy game called MMA. I just wish I had a graphic to compare the three events that, just really break it down. Really let people know. I'll go. Listen, I'll go. I think it's. I don't know. I remember we were. I think. On here, we were having some internal discussions, and I think we said pretty clearly there was a winner. But kind of looking back on things now, maybe listening to some people on the MMA Hour, talk about it. Listening to Sergio Pettis, things like that. I think it's closer. I think it's closer than people think. But I will still stick with PFL. They apparently did a very good ratings number. Don Davis, speaking of graphics, Don Davis tweeted out that it was what I think their most watched. I don't know if their most watched event yet. Top five on cable on the night. People can listen. You can, when we're talking about viewership numbers, you can always kind of tweak things and pick things out to make your program look better than it is. But 500,000 viewers, they said, really good number, not including streaming. Clearly, this was a watched event, and I think based on it having more social media traction than usual, I think we can believe those numbers. I think those numbers are real. And we know why it had more social media traction, because we knew Francis Ngannou was going to be in the building. Very well promoted by PFL. Excellent job. Because again, he's not fighting till next year, but anytime he shows up, you got to let people know. France is going to be here. Jon Jones is going to be here cornering Maurice Green in the main event. It's set up perfectly. It's set up perfectly for to have them meet. And then they funneled Jon Jones towards where Francis was right at the end. We got a nice face-off, beautifully filmed by Jed Michu. You guys can find that on MMA Fighting. And it was exciting. It was exciting. We know they can't fight in the PFL. We know they're not fighting in the UFC anytime soon. But just seeing it and just teasing the possibility, having a beaming Ray Sefo in the background, just looking super excited to have them in the same place. That's great. That's great. And it gets people talking. It lets people know that the PFL exists. Because listen, I don't mean to be condescending. They're 4 seasons in now. It still has nowhere near the casual cachet of a UFC. And I would still wager Bellator. I think Bellator has the history where if we're talking just like, I mean, it's not huge, but probably more people know what Bellator is or have heard of Bellator than PFL. But after a move like this, you really get people who know about who may only know about the UFC going like, oh, Jon Jones was there? That's cool. Oh, that's where Francis Ngannou went, the PFL, and they interacted with Jon Jones. And the card had a few, some decent finishes. I've been saying PFL has had a lot of luck this year with having at least like 5, 6, 7 finishes per card. That happened. Larissa Pacheco looked like a star, just ran through Amber LeBrock. Again, a lot of first-round finishes. That means you have to deal with PFL pacing. That's fine. That's a thing that still has to be dealt with. But I'll go PFL 1. I think UFC, the clear loser. Not a bad card at all. Not a bad card at all. But I have not heard word one about anyone talking about it after. I'm just quickly going over the results here. Man, nothing like came out of this. They tried to get Jared to talk about Khamzat. That was about it. That's really all you're getting. Armin, trying to get the Michael Chandler fight. So there's just no buzz. And it was a fine card. It wasn't even like a bad card at all. Just completely forgettable. And that's what people were saying ahead of time. Like on paper, it can be what it is, no matter what. It's not going to have any buzz. So Bellator sitting firmly in the middle. Great moment for Sergio Pettis. Bizarre main event. I mean, that's what happens when you have Yoel Romero in a title fight in the year of our Lord 2023. So not bad. Looked like the best card on paper. Was an okay card, and some conversation about it after. Not a lot. Right in the middle. So PFL, big winner. UFC this week, loser. But I mean, UFC overall is always winning. So why does it matter?
All right, Nick. You heard AK's power rankings. PFL, Bellator, UFC. Are you with him, or are you structuring yours a little differently?
Yeah, it was a very long answer. And then right at the end is when he finally said the point that mattered, which is that the UFC always wins. The winner of the weekend was the UFC, as it always will be and continue to be, because they are getting the most viewers and continue to be in prime spots on ESPN and just continue to run. And the machine keeps going and going and going and going, no matter what they are putting out. So the UFC will always win. And then underneath that, they can battle for second. Certainly, I think the PFL raised attention with the Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou thing. And AK said, I've seen everybody talking about that and nobody talking about the UFC card. I wonder in that same analysis if anybody was actually talking about anything from PFL other than Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou, which I already know the answer to. That was rhetorical, because the answer is no, they were not talking about anything else from that card. And the UFC has an even further kind of push of the marker here into first place, which is that their heavyweight champion goes over to the PFL, and it's the biggest story. It continues to be a UFC story, not a PFL story. Nobody is tuning into the PFL on the basis of Jon Jones showing up to confront Francis Ngannou. They just think, oh, wow, Jon Jones, the UFC champion, that was cool. And then they continue to watch the UFC every Saturday. So yeah, it's the UFC and then Bellator and PFL somewhere underneath there battling as they continue to do on social media, out for second place. But the UFC was the winner, as they will always be.
Yeah. Look, you can, I'll listen to any argument you want about this, because you can look at it from so many different perspectives, but clearly the biggest moment of the weekend came from the PFL card. And let me just say this. When Jed and I do the promotional Festivus at the end of the year, I'm going to have a lot to say about the PFL, and most of it is not going to be good. But what they did on Friday was brilliant, because Maurice Green's in the main event with Ante Delija. We're like, why is Maurice Green in the main event? And why is Larissa Pacheco not in the main event? And then we kind of figured out why. And then these days, the big reason why, Maurice Green fights, Jon Jones not far behind. And then we found out France is going to be in attendance, and we knew they would be in the same room, and fans knew and media knew, which is why the numbers were as high as they were, because they wanted to see if we would get these guys face to face, or at least Jon walking by Francis or something. They face off, they talk a little smack to each other. And if you look at the views on social media and YouTube, off the freaking chart. So let me ask you this, New York Rick, what, outside of like short term having the moment of the weekend, what did this even accomplish? Like, what impact did this moment have for the PFL, for anybody involved with it, really, outside of just a quick moment? And that was cool. And then a couple of days later, it's like, okay, now it's over.
Not much more than that. But the one thing I will give them credit for, and they continue to beat this drum, is they are the most vocal about, we are agnostic to the territorial part of this. We have a guy who we think is the best. You have a guy who you think is the best. Let's have them fight. And they are the ones beating that drum. And this was another example of it. Hey, we're going to have Jon Jones in our building, and our new signed heavyweight is going to square off with him. And it's a fight that everybody actually wants to see. And we have no problem with taking that route. We have no problem with letting this face off happen and saying we want to do this fight and getting out in front of it. I think that's good promotionally for them. I think this was something that was smart for their part to do. That, I think, is the only benefit. I do not think this will lead to any long-term viewers. I do not think this will eventually lead to a fight. Obviously, Jon Jones is not going to be fighting Francis Ngannou while he is under the UFC banner. But that does have some value. The ability to say, we're the ones who are out here saying, you have fighters, we have fighters, and we're willing to put our fighters up against your fighters. That matters to some people, and I think that's significant. And so that would be the benefit in my mind. But in terms of like actual long-term value and metrics and anything that could have come from it, there was probably not a significant impact.
AK, do you agree with that? Do you think this has any like long-term boosting potential at all, outside of just a cool moment on Friday between two heavyweights that wanted to fight but never did?
Mike, let me read a tweet here. New, period. Record, period. Audience, period. At PFL MMA last week equals 5th most watched event of all sports on cable. Head mind blown emoji, starry eye emoji. PFL 2023 up plus 50%. PFL US viewership now 3 times greater than the number 3 MMA company. Does not even name the company. Just saying whatever the number 3 MMA company is. 3 times US viewership. Hashtag PFL. Hashtag PFL MMA. Hashtag MMA. And of course, a fancy graphic to accompany. That was from one Mr. Don Davis. I would hope that a fraction of the people who tuned in would have not just tuned in for like the second half of the card. Like they would have seen Biagio Ali Walsh and said, I want to see more of Muhammad Ali's grandkid. They would have seen Larissa Pacheco and been like, Amanda Nunes is gone. This woman looks pretty good. I'm gonna tune in the next time she fights. I'm gonna tune in the next time Ante Delija beat John Jones's guy. Ante Delija must be good. Maybe I want to see Ante Delija fight Francis Ngannou. There's a lot of maybes that I'm throwing out here, guys. A lot of, but I'm just saying you don't have the possibility of this without this spike in viewership, without this spike in interest, and that's why you set up these gimmicky things. You hope that something will spark people to come back again, even if only a fraction of this 500K viewership comes back. It's probably still gonna be a boost over the usual cards. So it's been said they have one more event this week in Atlanta, PFL 6. I think it's the last regular season event. And we will see. We will see what the number is. It's certainly not going to be 500K. But if it's anywhere like, above, if there's any improvement over the usual number, I think we can point to this as being the starting point. And then of course we have to see if it carries over to playoffs and championships as well. But yes, I'm being optimistic here and saying hopefully some of those 500K that are new viewers will stick around.
Yes, can't wait to see Ante Elijah fight again until next year because he didn't make the freaking playoffs, which is
that's right. Oh,
oh man,
why you got to bring that up?
It's crazy.
Why you bring that up?
You know what? I don't really want to ask this, but I'm going to because this is the sport where you can continuously go back to this. Is PFL number 2 right now, AK? And I know this continues to be a thing, and it's a fight for number 2, and New York Rick is gonna lose his shit, and I don't care. Because Bellator's roster is 1,000 times better. And if they did a Bellator versus PFL event, Bellator would be like a minus 1,200 favorite to win the event. Like most of their fighters, most of their top ranked fighters are going to run over the PFL's top fighters. They have a case to have the best fighter in the world in multiple divisions. The problem is, AK, and I love Bellator and I want them to succeed. Nobody seems to care. And that's just such a big problem considering the talent on this roster. So in the overall spectrum right now, is PFL number 2? Like, are they the number 2 promotion?
Yeah, listen, we had a joke going, like, wouldn't it be nice, if the promotion slotted into like one championship number 2, because then there could be 2 championship, PFL number 3 could be the 3FL, and Bellator in 4th place is Bellator. But as cute as that is to say, I do think PFL right now is number 2. And this is, listen, nothing to do with roster, nothing to do with quality of fights, nothing to do with their choice of season format, which I quite like, but it's a give or take thing. It's, some people don't care for it. Some people think it's cool. It's also this whole season thing. 2 fights is just weird. But this is a meat and potatoes thing. This comes down to one of these is broadcast and has the wide support of ESPN. One of them doesn't. One of them is on Showtime. One, we don't even get that in Canada. So I'm unfamiliar with this is, but I'm told it does not have the widest reach as far in the US, if I'm to understand it. Certainly not as much as ESPN. And at this point, maybe not even ESPN Plus. But as long as ESPN can continue to pretend that Bellator doesn't exist and only push the UFC and only push PFL, Bellator is going to be fighting uphill. I mean, plus their own weird programming choices, having Nemkov Romero go off last over Sergio Pettis, Patricio Pitbull, just these weird little things where they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And then again, you add in just the broadcast limitations. There's just something that they just aren't able to connect with the fans. Even a big card like this, like we said, I think pretty clearly the best card on paper. You have former UFC fighters. That's usually always helps, but it's just not happening, and the Showtime deal isn't helping at all. So it really is just a matter of how many people even have access to your product and are likely to casually trip upon your product. It's much more likely to happen Friday night, Thursday night, Friday night. PFL runs events on either nights, this season, randomly flicking along. Oh, cool, there's cage fights. It's not UFC, but I would like MMA. I'll watch that. Then I don't know, that same thing happening with Bellator on Showtime. So it's just a sad reality of the situation. But yeah, PFL number 2, yeah.
If I know New York Rick, and I think that I do, there's two things he loves to debate. One, what is the greatest of all time in a certain weight class or in the sport? And even more so, what's the second best anything in MMA? And here we go, New York Rick. I mean, you're a guest on the show, and I'm so honored and happy that you are here, that I wanted to throw this bone to you. One of your favorite topics of all time is PFL number 2 right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. As you've astutely laid out, I love nothing more than talking about this. I cannot change my tune now. I would love, I obviously the framing of this question is pushing me toward an answer, and to your best effort, I cannot divert from, I cannot shift courses from what I've said before, which is that there is no number 2, and it does not matter in the least who number 2 is. They should not be trying to fight for number 2. They should be fighting for number 1. They should be trying to be number 1. They should be differentiating. And this obsession with being number 2 is, quite frankly, like, pathetic in my eyes. It's useless. It's meaningless. And there was a quote I read in an article from The Ringer. I actually brought this up while AK was talking because it stuck with me for so long. Brian Curtis of The Ringer wrote this in 2018. It was an article about the show High Noon on ESPN, but from Eric Rydholm, who's also the mind behind Jesus and Mero. Jesus and Mero is a great show former show that started with Complex and then went to Showtime, between these two great New York personalities who have since kind of had a rift, but they are amazing. And it was one of my favorite shows. And one of the things that Rydholm said that really stuck with me was when he was talking about Jesus and Mero, he said the following quote: "There are far more people who know the show and feel like they watch the show," and emphasis on feel, it's italicized, "and feel like they watch the show than people who actually watch the show." That's, I think, the best case I can hope for here. So he's talking about the future of High Noon, and he's talking about Jesus and Mero, and more people feel like they know about and watch the show than actually watch the show. That is Bellator. That is PFL. That is the battle for second place. More people feel like they watch Bellator, and more people feel like they watch PFL than actually watch PFL. And it's insignificant. They need to be pushing for viewers. They need to be doing things to change their and it is not going to be mired in this battle and debate for who's number 2. That is not the way forward.
Well, let me just say this. This is the end of the round, but I got a feeling, and this could be a little teaser, something to prepare yourselves for. I don't think we're done with this topic. But we move on to round 3. The point for round 2 goes to there it is. New York Rick. I mean, Mr. Consistency.
Good.
You try to throw him a curveball, he just
I want to be number 2 that round.
Right field line.
I want to be number 2 that round. Good. Who really won? I just love that question. By the way, if number 2 merges with number 2, what happens? Is it just even more two-ish? Do they become the 2ist promotion ever?
AK.
One of the 2s becomes.
Oh,
one of the 2s becomes, what is it, the exponent or whatever, the factor of. They become to the factor of.
Right.
That's tremendous. But maybe we'll talk more about that in a little while. But
all right.
Let's move on to a division that has gotten really interesting. The UFC's middleweight division has actually gotten pretty interesting. Israel Adesanya is back as champion after defeating Alex Pereira. We have a lot of important fights on the books at 185 for one reason or the other for the UFC in the next few weeks. Some that could have significant impact on the division and title implications. Last weekend, we had a very fun fight between Jared Cannonier and Marvin Vettori, aka the toughest chin on planet Earth. These two guys battled. Cannonier pulled away, and my opinion, this was the best performance of his entire career. So, New York Rick, grade that performance from Jared Cannonier, the one-time middleweight title challenger.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. I gotta admit, I'm gonna go 8.5 out of 10. Like, that was a pretty damn complete performance. For one, being rocked in round 1, clearly stunned by Marvin Vettori. and then turning it completely around in round 2 to the point where it was a 10-8, and then continuing to kind of dominate the rest of that fight, showing he had cardio, showing he could set a record pace for middleweight strikes in a division that has featured mostly strikers, right? Like if you think about the champions from Anderson to Israel, it's kind of been more of a striking owned division. I was impressed, man. I was impressed to the point where I'm like, I'm not dying to see Cannonier versus Israel Adesanya again, but would I turn it down? Would I feel as bad about it as I felt the last time they had that fight? I wouldn't. I now am willing to put Jared Cannonier back in contender position, mostly because of how good I think at a baseline level Marvin Vettori is. He's extremely tough, and most other guys who would have taken those shots from Cannonier probably would have been finished. He's just got an inhuman chin. But yeah, really strong performance against a guy who I rate highly in the middleweight division. I was impressed. I was truly impressed.
AK, not a lot of people are giving this a lot of like credible, hope that this is even going to be a fun fight, let alone a lot of people weren't giving Jared Cannonier a lot of a chance because of the way Marvin Vettori puts on the pressure with the way he competes. Like it felt like a really solid matchup for Marvin Vettori, and because just Marvin can't be hurt, but Jared hurt him a lot in this fight. Like he didn't put him away, but he hurt him a lot in this fight. 8.5 from New York Rick. Where are you putting Jared Cannonier's performance?
I'll go a little bit higher. I'll go like 8.8. I was almost gonna go 9, but I guess 9 would have been it would have been 10 if he had finished him. I'll go 8.8. I'll stop at 9. I will say I was one of the few who thought this could be an entertaining main event. I thought we would get sort of the Marvin that fought Paulo Costa, as opposed to maybe the more methodical Marvin, or the more kind of like less offensively aggressive Marvin. Not that he had a chance to get much off in this fight, because Jared was, the last 4 rounds at least was fantastic. So all the credit in the world to him. I did pick the wrong winner though. I actually thought Marvin, we're saying all this great stuff about Cannonier putting together like a strong 5-round performance and showing off the cardio. I thought Vettori would have the cardio advantage. And I'm not saying cardio was his weakness here, but Cannonier's cardio looked fantastic. He was with him all the way. So I was somewhat right that I thought the fight could be a good one. Totally wrong on the winner. Unlike Rick, I will say I'm not super enthused about seeing Cannonier again. I know he's in position now where like he could be the backup for the Israel Adesanya fight, whoever Izzy ends up fighting. I would be very surprised. Very surprised. Like I get it, if they don't have any other options, he wants to fight and Sydney has to fight somebody. Boy, I would hope they would have to find someone besides Cannonier, because I thought that first fight was unwatchable. And I know he looked better against Marvin. I always say I'm one of the people who will tell you first that rematches rarely go exactly the same as the first fight. But I just think like Cannonier and Izzy is such a bad style matchup, and you do end up with a poor fight entertainment-wise, like 9 times out of 10. I just don't think they match up well as far as being crowd pleasers. I think Cannonier and Vettori was, again, on paper, a much better chance of turning into a decent fight, which was what we got. So all the credit in the world to Cannonier. I always say it's not all about getting back to title shots, though I know that's what he wants. He's done everything he can so far. Like we always say, well, if someone's guys going to be a contender, if they really want to prove it, they need at least 1 or 2 wins. Got 2 good wins against ranked guys. But I'm not enthusiastic about it. I could see him being the backup. I could totally see him being the backup for that Sydney card, but him actually being initially booked to be in that spot, I don't think I want it, and I don't think the UFC is crazy about going that direction either.
Yeah,
can I just clarify something? Let me be clear. I went from, oh no, oh my God, no, to, okay, like, don't hate it. Like, don't love it, but don't hate it. I just want to be clear on the degrees I went to in terms of Cannonier's title contention. I went from, oh no, please God, no, to like, all right, maybe if I'm forced.
Yeah, it was your Lloyd Christmas, Mary Swanson, Dumb and Dumber moment when she said 1 in a million. Oh, you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, that's kind of what Jared Cannonier did here. Because I was like, you guys, even if he won a decision, I would have been like, well, if this is a Cannonier decision, I don't think there'd be any appetite for him to fight Israel Adesanya. And not just next, but like anytime soon. But I feel like the door is somewhat open. And AK, I know we talked about this on to the next one, but I feel even stronger now today that the UFC 1000% needs to book Cannonier versus Khamzat Chimaev in Abu Dhabi next. Do it in October, because if Cannonier really does want a title shot, especially with Israel Adesanya as the champion, if he beats Khamzat Chimaev, this to me is outside of a last minute, we need you on 10 days notice to fill in for fighter B. This is probably his best chance to get there. So do you think that Dana and the matchmakers and the UFC brass Tuesday in the war room, they were already talking about trying to put this fight together?
I want to say yes, Mike, but I have no idea what conversations they have about Khamzat Chimaev at this point. Again, it's very unclear. I think the slant, I'm trying to read the tea leaves here and gauge sort of public opinion. I think the slant has gone towards like questioning the UFC. Why haven't they booked him? Are they giving him the requisite 3 fights a year? Because if not, then how are they honoring the terms of the contract, right? Dana White always says all the time, listen, I don't know why this guy isn't fighting. We offer 3 fights a year. If they don't want to fight, they don't want to fight. We offer 3 fights a year. So just by, using math here, theoretically, the UFC has offered fights and Khamzat hasn't taken them. And again, I don't know what to believe. If you look at Khamzat's social media, when he tweets these days, it's generally about, hey, I'm ready to fight on this date, or I want to fight this person. I want to fight this person. I want to fight this person. So the truth is somewhere in between. I honestly cannot tell you what conversations they're having about him, because it feels like, yeah, Jared Cannonier, very logical coming after that performance. That should have been what they were talking about Tuesday's meeting. But I also feel like there's other fight cards that happened this year where they could have talked about Khamzat and made something happen. So I'm leaning towards like that it has not come up as a point of priority, just because we just don't know what's going on with Khamzat. Jared has fought himself into a position where a number 1 contender's bout with Khamzat makes a lot of sense, makes a ton of sense. But it's the Khamzat part of this equation that I am so unsure of. And we talked about, will Conor McGregor fight this year? You could ask me the same thing about Khamzat, and honestly, my answer would be pretty low. It feels like he has to land in Abu Dhabi against somebody. Cannonier, very logical name, but we just haven't heard any rumblings, any even the slightest like murmur that this guy is going to be booked anytime soon. So listen, hopefully a reverse jinx. I said that, and as soon as BTL goes off the air, we get a Khamzat fight report. I don't know.
Yo, Greg, is this the fight to make after this performance? Jared Cannonier versus Khamzat Chimaev. Is this the fight to make?
I'd rather see Costa versus Khamzat, which has been teased and talked about, and I like the build to that a little bit better. But I wouldn't mind Cannonier Khamzat. I think it's a credible challenge, and somebody who, if Khamzat wins, you could really shove him right to a title shot. But quite frankly, the UFC has just botched this, and I just want to see Khamzat fight. I don't care who he's fighting. He could be fighting me. He could be fighting you. As long as he's fighting sometime, somewhere, that's all I really care about. So, yeah, I mean, Cannonier's brother, his cousin, somebody else on the roster, somebody else not even on the roster. Great. Feed him to the Khamzat and let's just see what happens. I'm down for it. But as a style matchup, as a credible fight, like I think that's interesting enough and definitely a high enough ranked guy that if Khamzat can win, you shove him into a title shot. And if Cannonier can stop Khamzat coming off this performance against Vettori, I'm okay with him re-entering the title conversation, especially now on the heels of another defense for Israel, maybe, or another defense opportunity for Israel and Whitaker and DDP. Maybe the champion isn't Israel Adesanya anymore, and things get refreshed. So yeah.
Well, what are we going to do with Israel Adesanya in New York, Rick? While the division is interesting, it's been kind of mismatched. It's like AEW booked the UFC's middleweight division. Just too much gaga, all this stuff. Like it leads to nothing really, or it could potentially lead to nothing, because Izzy is expected to fight in September on that Sydney card. And I just don't know who he could or is going to fight at this point. Like, yes, there's fights in the books. Robert Whitaker versus DDP. Dana White is saying the winner of this fight's going to turn around and fight in Sydney and fight Israel Adesanya for the title. But that's an awfully quick turnaround. We were being very optimistic about the durability of these two gentlemen, especially with DD freaking P involved, who is just all gas, no brakes, pure chaos. So I figure, it's 121. It's time to rile some people up, New York Rick. Who's the guy? Who's the guy that could step in there in Sydney, Australia, and fight Israel Adesanya for the UFC middleweight championship of the freaking world?
It's a good question, Mike. I feel like you've teed this up very, very nicely for me. So I'm just going to go out and say it. I'm not going to give the whole preamble that I gave last time. The answer is Bo Nickel. And I'll tell you why the answer is Bo Nickel.
Woo!
Because if we're waiting for the result of Robert Whittaker and DDP, there's also another person who's fighting at UFC 290 that you can wait on the result of, and that's Bo Nickel. If you're talking about potentially throwing Sean Strickland into the equation, which I've seen bandied about, right? There's almost like we're operating with this almost assumption, I feel like, from MMA fans, where it's like Whittaker and DDP are not going to be able to turn around in time. That's kind of the going sentiment that I feel. I think that, kind of remains to be seen. Let's see how that fight plays out. But that's the sentiment I kind of feel. At which case they kind of default to Sean Strickland, to which I ask, why? Why does Sean Strickland have to be the answer? How about Bo Nickel, American wrestler Bo Nickel? If he can get past Tresean Gore, A, I think he'd be willing to turn around. B, it's a lot more compelling a fight from an actual styles perspective for me to see Bo Nickel and Israel Adesanya, especially because I think Bo Nickel's hands are still a little bit raw and he's not there. I'd like to kind of see it a little bit early. And C, I promise you the odds on a Bo Nickel and Israel Adesanya fight are going to be a lot closer than on a Sean Strickland Israel Adesanya fight or a DDP Israel Adesanya fight. So this idea that I don't want to hear about Bo, it's too early, he's only this XYZ. Save the gripes, save the crying, save the whining. I'm okay with it. And look, if Bo goes in there and gets smoked, I promise you they'll be counting their pay-per-view money and not worried about it, because he'll be back and Israel Adesanya will be champion. And if not, now you've got something special. Now you've got a super prospect who just took out a long reigning middleweight champion with that Alex Pereira hiccup in the middle there, but somebody who's defended the title many, many times. And Bo Nickel's just got a rocket strapped to his back. So yeah, I think this idea of it kind of has to be Sean Strickland because Whittaker and DDP are not going to turn around in time. I say bully to that. And I say, give Bo a chance.
Dude, Sean Strickland's got a tough fight ahead of him. Avis Magomedov
and that too
is a tough fight. Who knows? Maybe it's Avis Magomedov. AK, you're here. Bo Nickel. This has been, my mentions on Twitter have been exploding since Tuesday, thanks to New York Rick, because it ended up being very compelling because people were like, oh, this is the stupidest friggin' idea I've ever heard. But then people start talking about it. They're like, maybe this isn't as crazy as I thought it was when I first heard it. Is this crazy, AK? Is New York Rick out of his mind?
There were also some not so nice comments about you on MMAfighting.com, Mike. But don't worry, I've erased those comments. Don't. You don't need to look at those. Don't worry. Don't worry about those. Don't worry about those. We don't.
I just asked the freaking question. Oh,
exactly. You're just asking questions. I thought the MMA community loved that.
It was asking me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Crazy.
Anyway, listen. They're shooting the messenger, or even the receiver in this case. New York, I hate that I love that suggestion so much because listen, this would harken back to me to the days of old school UFC, right? Which is like we're just gonna take the best wrestler in this weight class right now, and we're gonna put him up against I guess I don't want to just call Izzy a kickboxer, but this would be wrestling versus kickboxing, UFC 2, Bo Nickel, Israel Adesanya. Izzy is so much more than that now, both guys, and Bo is obviously much more than just a wrestler, but it really would remind me of that. And this is before we didn't care about this guy's 30-0 in kickboxing, and this, or sorry, we would care about that. We would look at their record in other combat sports. Bo Nickel's incredible collegiate and amateur wrestling record, and you would look at that and just be enough to say, yeah, I want to see these two fight. I think there's something intriguing here, but I get it. That was friggin' 25 years ago now. The sport has evolved so much. I understand we need to stop evoking the ghost of the original UFCs, and that's fine. But I don't hate that suggestion at all. I actually think it's really cool, and I could totally see the UFC being able to market it. Now, but for my suggestion, Mike, how did you phrase the question? Did you say who's going to step up and fight Izzy for the middleweight title?
Who's the guy? Who's the guy?
Well, I got to step way out of the box here because I don't know if there is anyone available to challenge for the middleweight title now. I think I'd want to see Izzy actually go up to 205 again. Have a little dalliance up at 205, just so we can get it. Because again, I just don't. Besides Bo Nickel, which I just don't. I think it's too soon. I don't think there's anyone else that I could throw into the middleweight title fight right now. And again, unless Khamzat pops out of nowhere, and he should not get a middleweight title. He's less deserving of a middleweight title shot right now than Bo Nickel. I think he goes up 205, and they give him a title fight with a guy who's been waiting for his first defense, well, Mr. Jamal Hill. I think Izzy gets a chance to become a 2-division champion. I'm going way outside the box here. I know this is crazy, but that'd be a hell of a homecoming if he were able to pull that off. I think he'd be favored in that fight. I don't know if I'm not saying I think he'd run through Jamal Hill, but again, he would. I think he would be when the odds come in, he would be favored, and the crowd would be absolutely going nuts to see him get a chance. And if he wins, and if Alex Pereira beats Jan Blachowicz, guess what? Then you get your third MMA fight between Izzy and Pereira for UFC Gold again. So there you go.
Or
I think that could happen.
I mean, look, listen, I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think that's an idea that people have been throwing out. Like, if we just run out of, there's nobody there, like, let's give Jamal Hill a call. He turned around like 2 weeks notice to fight Glover Teixeira. So, I mean, he was preparing for another fight, obviously, but turned back around and fought for the belt and won. And yeah, it'd be interesting. I just don't know what the hell's going to happen. Can you imagine? I got to tell you, New York Rick, I am rooting for this Bo Nickel idea to come to fruition so badly. just because I just want to see the reactions to it. It's not going to happen. This is not my suggestion, but I honestly, after seeing all the comments and just seeing everything, just based on a headline from a call-in radio show that we do, I want it to happen so bad, and I'm going to try to will it into existence as much as possible, New York Rick.
Yeah, this is the point, right? Like, you are excited about it. Look, I'm not arguing that Bo Nickel is the most competitive matchup for Israel Adesanya. That's not my argument. I think Robert Whittaker, amongst middleweights, I don't consider Khamzat a middleweight yet, but I think Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya are the two best middleweights. I think those two, now with Alex leaving as well, there's a lot of asterisks that I have to place on this. But Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya are the two best remaining middleweights, and I think that is the best style matchup. That is the best competitive fight. But if you're asking me, do I want to see that a third time, or would I rather see some fresh blood in the form of Bo Nickel and see, what that American wrestling looks like, what that amateur wrestling looks like? Yeah, I mean, I could be convinced, and I think there'd be a way to sell it, and I think the fans getting angry and simultaneously excited about it would be a great way to do that. But I also do like AK's suggestion. I don't hate the idea of Israel Adesanya versus Jamal Hill. That's a fun fight.
I have to see Jamal Hill fight Yuri Prochazka this year. Didn't Tim Simpson go on the MAR and say Yuri's like ready to go? Didn't he say that?
Yes,
I hope so.
He did.
I hope so.
So what's going on?
That's what I'm saying. We don't know. Maybe they need Jamal to fight Izzy. Maybe that's why.
Well, if in the world where it seemed like Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor was kind of being earmarked for December, in the world where now that's not necessarily the December pay-per-view, now you have some options open, right? Now maybe there is a Jamal versus Yuri type fight that happens. And then at the end of the year, I feel like the back half of the calendar has gotten a little bit messy while they're waiting for the Jon Jones situation to settle. Now with Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler in flux, I think they've got some things to sort out. But yeah, I like, to be honest, if you're Jamal Hill, both those fights are big time fights, and I'd be sitting pretty with either one of those.
Yep. Well, let's move on to this weekend's festivities. The point for round 3 goes to I mean, it has to go to New York, Rick. It just has to. I mean, just making the case. AK feeling like the Raptors brass in the draft room right now, just rolling their eyes, realizing. So the UFC is back in Jacksonville, AK. I feel like you're the right person to go to. You can go ahead and do your call in a moment. But main event, featherweight division, Ilia Topuria looking to remain undefeated, taking on Josh Emmett, who just fought for the interim title against Yair Rodriguez earlier this year. Yair stopping a pretty good win streak for Josh Emmett. AK, I don't know if you saw the betting lines on this. Ilia Topuria is like a minus 345 favorite heading into this fight, which I'm not surprised Topuria is like a good size favorite, but I just felt like that's that's really wide considering the experience that Josh Emmett has being in 5-round fights and just the level of competition he's fought. But your thoughts on the matchup? What are these guys fighting for here, AK? What are the stakes in this main event on ABC this Saturday?
First of all, people shout out Duval. Thank you for the graphic right there, Casey. Appreciate Casey. Shout out to Duval. Can I get some Duvals in the chat? For Topuria, it's obvious. I mean, Topuria can get a title shot right off of this win. I mean, that's it. He wins his fight. I'm not saying he's guaranteed a title shot, but there's nothing. I don't think there's anything more he has to do. Emmett just fought for interim title. Bryce Mitchell was Topuria dominated Bryce Mitchell. I think people might want to see one more ranked win, and that's fine. I won't argue. But, when you've got a dominant champion of Volkanovski who constantly needs fresh challengers, you could do a lot worse than Ilia Topuria. He's got that. If he wins on Saturday, he'll keep that nice undefeated tag. That's always a fun thing to have when you're presenting a challenger who, maybe the hardcore fans know, but some of the more lapsed fans might not be familiar with. You show them, hey, 14-0. Look at this submission you got. Look at this sick knockout of Chai Herbert. And then, then you're building some intrigue. There's a lot of stuff getting in the way of that. Of course, Volkanovski, if he gets past Jerry Rodriguez, we know he might want to sort of start campaigning for that Makhachev rematch. I know fans still want to see that. I think the UFC is very interested in it. First fight, super competitive. So Topuria is fighting not for an immediate title shot, but to at least for the opportunity that if he wins, he'll have the option to sit for a bit and see what happens with Volkanovski. Because if Volkanovski does defend again, I got to take a quick look at the featherweight rankings here. I just really can't imagine who would be above Topuria, unless you think Topuria has to go through Arnold Allen. Allen just had that tough loss to Holloway. It would really have to be Topuria. There's a lot of great names at featherweight. He's just right now is the best mixture of a guy who has experience, but is also young, also still up and coming. If he lost to Volkanovski, could theoretically put together a run and fight Volkanovski again somewhere down the road. And talking about sort of opportunity and age, that's what Emmett's fighting for, man. I mean, listen, to stay relevant. I don't know if he gets a title shot again, certainly not anytime soon. If he beats Topuria, great. Holds on to his spot, takes this kid's hype, again, stays in the winner's column, stays relevant. But it's a long climb, I think, for Emmett to get a shot at either whoever ends up having the belt in the future, whether it's Yair or Volkanovski. So it's a must win for him in that sense. Otherwise, he loses on Saturday. We start getting into these talks of retirement. He's 38 years old. We start getting talks of, is it, should he try fighting at lightweight, which would be, comfortable for him, but he'd probably have a ceiling there. He's not the biggest guy. So, he is fighting to stay relevant and avoid all that talk that comes from the fans and us talking into the media. We're like, should Josh Emmett hang it up? And I don't think any fighter wants to put up with that crap. So there's a lot on the line for him as well.
New York Rick, Ilia Topuria -345, a comeback on Josh Emmett +285. Are you surprised that it's this wide?
No, because I think, man, quite frankly, I think Ilia Topuria is a bad style matchup for like everybody in the division. He's just too well-rounded. He's just too sharp on the feet. He's shown he's also great on the ground. Like, I don't say it a lot, but I think he's got that future champ potential. I'm not one of those people who like really just like calls everybody a future champion. Like it's been rare, few and far between. Khamzat's definitely one of them. He smells like a future champion, man. He's just so well-rounded. And when he smells blood, he's an absolute killer. You look at the rankings, like if he takes Josh Emmett's spot at 5, if he can get the win and take Josh Emmett's spot at 5, there's Arnold Allen, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez in front of him. And if I'm any of those guys, like I probably don't want that smoke, but I might be forced into it. It feels like maybe like, I don't know if you get a title shot off this. Maybe in the case if Volkanovski moves up to 155 and starts chasing that title, now all of a sudden you've got more opportunities for contenders, and now you've got 2 people that need to be in a title fight, and maybe this is the one that gets them. But if this is not the one, maybe you see how the Max Holloway Korean Zombie fight plays out. Not that there's much intrigue or surprise to that one. After Max Holloway dusts Korean Zombie, you kind of swoop in there, and maybe you do the Max fight. Can you be the one to break Max Holloway that wasn't Alexander Volkanovski, and then you're ready for title contention? And if not, Brian Ortega's been on the sidelines for a while. He's I believe not the exact quote, but the sentiment of it was Topuria was calling out Ortega, and Ortega said, like, you're not going to talk your way up here. If he beats Josh Emmett, it's not talk anymore. Now it's time to put pen to paper, and I wouldn't be mad about an Ilia Topuria Brian Ortega fight. So this feels like, to AK's point, like the one step before. But man, this would mean something, and I think it would put the top of that division on notice. So, and as far as Emmett goes, yeah, he's up there in age, but he really hasn't lost a lot in his career. He's been very, very steady. So this could be one of those where he bounces back and gets right back on track, like his last loss. But we'll see. He's getting up there in age. I don't know how much more he has to prove. Is he going to be a title challenger again? I really doubt it, but I think he can still hang around. Like, we just watched 39-year-old Jared Cannonier kind of reinvent his title candidacy over the weekend. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible. But yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot more downside to losing than there is upside for winning for Josh Emmett, but it's still a very important fight for him.
Yep. Love the fight. I actually feel like if Ilia goes out there and just waxes Josh Emmett and like stops him, gets him out of there, like inside of 3 rounds, I think Volk will be like, all right, cool. Like, I kind of want to fight that dude. Like, that'd be a fun little challenge, although he's got to get by Yair Rodriguez, and that fight is going to absolutely rule. So last thing, there is going to be a preview show about this card tomorrow. I believe it's at 3 p.m. Eastern with the wonderful colleagues of mine at MMAfighting.com doing the preview. But AK, what is the best fight on this card that is getting no attention?
I don't mind the co-main, but I would say that's getting a fair bit of attention. I'm going to go off main card here. I am really, oh God, I got to say, well, it's obvious. Tatsuro Taira, Clayton Rodriguez. Flyweight unders are back. Listen, flyweight unders are back. These guys are both young gunners. There are a few younger guns than Tatsuro Taira in the entire UFC. I think he just recently, I shouldn't say recently, but earlier this year turned 23 years old. Clayton's not old by any means, 27. Both guys are flyweight finishers. Taira has just looked, again, he's the guy, he debuted, I don't want to say in the same card, but like I think the same month as like Makhachev. And listen, I totally understand why Makhachev is the more hyped prospect. I do think he is further along, despite the age being similar. But man, Taira was really sneaking under the radar. You just don't hear a lot of buzz. And I think he's like always opening cards. This time he's the second fight on the preliminary cards. So I love how that, and maybe they don't finish each other, but I think there will be some fun scrambles, some fun exchanges. I think you're going to see 2 guys who are both going to have good careers in the UFC. If they don't fight for a title, will end up ranked. Tatsuro Taira, I would say for sure. Clayton, I actually also think has a chance to get ranked, even if he loses on Saturday. So pretty easy pick for me. Flyweights rule. And listen, there's also Zalgas and Joshua Van too, so some people want to go that. But great showcase for the flyweights. But I'll lean towards the Taira Rodriguez fight for now. That's my sleeper.
It's a great pick. You're correct. Best fight on the card, getting no attention.
It's the man that always flies under the radar. It's Neil Magny. It's Neil Magny and Phil Rowe. I love that fight. Phil Rowe's on quite a nice little streak, and Magny's kind of been bouncing up and down. But this is the fight. This is the one that I like. If Phil Rowe can beat Neil Magny, I think that puts him in a class that we might not have kind of seen for him at the outset, and I'd be impressed, and I'd like to kind of see where he goes from here. And Neil has another opportunity to be the guy who just gets in there with anybody, tough, unranked, ranked, doesn't really matter, and either shuts them down or becomes a stepping stone to the next level. So I love this fight, and I love Neil Magny. He continues to do it and be underrated and be undervalued, but I will not undervalue him. I love Neil Magny versus Phil Rowe. Great fight.
Yeah. It's a pretty good card. Like, David Onama is like always fun. Gabriel Santos is a fun fighter. That fight's gonna be great. Randy Brown, Wellington Turman. That one probably ain't going to the cards. Matush Rebecki, like Radzabov's gonna be really fun, especially if it gets to the ground. Tabitha Ricci, Jillian Robertson. Like, Jillian Robertson goes out there and beats Tabitha Ricci at 115. Go for it. Strap the rockets to her. And let's give her a push to 115. So lots to like about this card. I will be there on Saturday. I'm pretty excited. I haven't been boots on the ground for a UFC card in almost a year, so I'm excited for that. So let us move on. Potentially, the point for round 4 goes to Give him a Duval. AK, it's 2-2.
Duval!
And you know what that means? Shocker, I know. We're going to the knockout round. One question will decide it all. 60 seconds for each of these wonderful competitors to give their response. New York Rick, you are the champion. What are we going to do here? Do you want to go first, or do you want to pass it over to AK Price is Right style?
I will always go first.
Ooh, I love this. So we had a wonderful conversation a little bit earlier about the PFL and Bellator, and there have been rumors, some innuendo, if you will, about possibly PFL buying out Bellator, maybe a merger of some kind. Scott Coker said a partnership. PFL is on the table. Ray Sefo also confirmed that there are discussions going on. Ariel talked about it on the MMA Hour on Monday, or yesterday, excuse me. Let's just say, New York Rick, that this deal happens and the PFL folk, they call you on the telephone. They say, New York Rick, we can't move this forward without your brilliance. You wanted to do Israel Adesanya versus Bo Nickel. This is the kind of forward thinking we need in order to make this promotion run to the best of its ability. So 60 seconds on the clock, and do the best you can here, because this is a pretty loaded question. If you accept that role and this deal gets done, what's the number one priority? What's the first thing we got to do with this PFL Bellator merger? 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
Yeah, it's to take the best parts of both companies, right? I think the PFL's tournament format and their ability to do something that's a little bit different than what the UFC is doing, not essentially falling into the UFC light trap, is what I would keep from PFL side. Infusing that with the talent of the Bellator roster, which I think, you alluded to, their champions are as good as they've ever been, and the rest of the depth of that roster is what I would continue to introduce. And then beef up that super fight series. I would lean really, really hard into Jake Paul's involvement, make sure I get a fight for Francis Ngannou. Now we've got some more options because of the infusion of talent from the Bellator roster. Finally be able to do Kayla Harrison versus Chris Cyborg. There's a lot that my mind's already cooking. I'd love to take the keys of the number 2 promotion in the world, the now PFL Bellator hybrid. But I actually think there is a lot that they can do to be successful and compete with the UFC.
All right. So New York Rick gave his thoughts, but you know what? They can't just hand New York Rick the job. He's got to fight for it. And the man who's going to try to take this position, a man that the PFL is all interested in, is the Prince of Positivity, Alexander Kaylee. Maybe they want a positive approach to running this promotion and putting them in a position they never expected they could be in. So, AK, you get the call. You're now the director of fighter operations for this new merging promotion, and you have to make a move right out the gate to plant that flag. What are we doing? What's the number one priority in your eyes? 1 minute on the clock. Go.
I mean, listen, thank God, just adding Bellator and giving them the option of having their heavyweight roster to fight Francis, it just makes this a winning deal already. Like I was joking about Ante Delija before. There's a very realistic chance he's Francis' first PFL opponent, and bless 2022 PFL champion Ante Delija. There's just not a lot of smoke there, but you have something more intriguing with Minakov, with Ryan Bader, Valentin Moldavsky, Vadim Nemkov, come up for a super fight with Francis. So there you go. That's the one thing is you have something for Francis. You're building your whole 2024 campaign around Francis fighting at least 2 times, getting those eyeballs on there, like I said, getting people through the door, and then you can work on selling everything else. And then I love the idea of keeping, some people would want to streamline it. I want to keep everything. I want the season tournaments. I want the Grand Prix. I want the non-tournament fights. Keep it all. I've recently gotten into football, soccer, footy, and like they do all these weird mid-season tournaments things in addition to the regular season, and it's all mixed in together, and it's beautiful, and it's the biggest sport in the world, and this will become the biggest promotion in the world if you give me that same kind of organized chaos in an MMA promotion.
I know what Casey's first thing is. Everybody fights in the round Bellator cage, even the PFL fighters. That'd be his first priority.
Whoa.
All right, well, there you go. The 2 guys vying for the role. So cast your votes, get them in right there in the chat, and we'll give it 45 seconds to 60 seconds to let the votes come on in. And yes, preview show tomorrow. Get excited for that. We should have a heck of a morning tomorrow. We'll have UFC Jacksonville weigh-ins. I believe they start at 9 a.m. Eastern. So AK will be on the will be on the ones and twos with the keyboard there. So get excited for that. He will keep you up to date on what's going on.
Are they still only at 9 a.m.? They're not earlier?
I think they're 9.
Really? That's tough for the fighters, right? Because they're getting like barely a 24-hour turnaround. Oh, I guess that's not crazy, but wow. Because 11:30 the next day, 9 a.m. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
ABC. It's that ABC life.
Yeah.
We'll have a People's Pre-Fight show at, I believe, 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. Isn't that exciting? Post-fight show probably around 6:30 or 7. I mean, just hitting the sweet spot. If we had like 2 less fights, this would be like the perfect ABC card. And then we'll have on to the next one.
Don't jinx it. Zhalgas Zhumagulov is booked, so don't jinx it. You could. I don't know if the man ever gets in the cage again. Stuff just keeps happening to him, so you could end up with that. You could get your less fights wish.
I'm not even going to say what I want to say right now because I'm very high on Josh Van, and I want to be like, oh, he's definitely going to show up, but I'm knocking on wood right now. So, Casey, you're here on the screen, so something tells me we have a winner, or is this a battle?
No,
or are we just waiting?
It is a battle. I need everyone to call their friends and get their votes in now because it is a battle right now.
Toll free. Your vote.
All right,
guys.
Toll free. Call it.
Just
1-800 between the links.
No idea.
1 for New York Rick. Press 2 for AK Lee.
Let's get this going. Just vote for Alex and let's get this over with. Come on, people.
Whoa.
I agree. No, I agree. Yes. Let's.
I love that.
What New York Rick said.
Okay,
Oh,
I'm
man,
gonna
New
give
York
it about
Rick
30 more
taking the humble
seconds. It's too close. It's too close. I can't let it go right now.
I mean, there was a clear winner.
So
Come on,
exciting.
guys. Do the right thing. Do the right thing and vote for AK.
Yes, and then next week, guys. Oh no, PFL has a card tomorrow too.
Yeah,
Don't
we didn't
forget.
talk about
But
that.
No.
PFL.
Oh,
Yes, Shane Burgos is
Yes,
back.
Friday
The
night.
better
OAM.
divisions.
Hopefully they
OAM's
get that
back. You get
residual
Anthony
John
Romero.
Jones and Francis Ngannou face-off viewership.
they will. Oh, they
How many
will.
times are they gonna? How many times will they show? Oh, all right. I'm setting the over under 2.5. Over under 2.5. How many times will they replay that face off on the
Over.
broadcast tomorrow?
Oh, well over.
Way over. Oh yeah.
They do a thing where they bring the same guest person out multiple times within one broadcast. Like they'll bring Francis Ngannou out and then they'll do an interview with him and then 4 hours later they'll bring him back out. There's no way they don't use that footage 10 times.
I will be so disappointed if it does not start off with last week on PFL. We saw UFC champion John Jones face off for Ngannou. I'll be
That's
so
amazing.
sad if they don't start. Please.
It's PFL's version of Untough, the push, the Conor Chandler push. We've seen like 6 billion times, but
Yeah.
Add that to their intro. Yeah. That face off should be in their intro for.
And by the way, to be honest, this is exactly what they should do. That's exactly what they should do. They should do this 30 times until you can't, your eyeballs fall out of your head because you can't see it anymore.
They should play it between rounds.
Yeah. It should be on a big screen just looping in the arena.
Instead of cutting away to the corner, just cut away to a little insert of just the Francis John loop. Okay,
their logo should be they should do like the NBA, like the logo should be a silhouette of John and Francis.
It's John grabbing Francis's bicep.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and Francis touching his belly.
That's the logo.
Oh man, that should have been your answer for the first priority. That should
All
have
right,
been your answer.
Okay,
are we closing?
Polls are closing very soon. Oh man.
Oh, I'm just looking at Casey's face right now, trying to get a read on the situation.
Oh,
I think you should close them in 15 seconds, no matter what. You closed it?
Okay, I closed it.
Oh my gosh. All right, Casey, reveal it. Is New York Rick with a successful title defense? Does he get it done? Or does AK Lee come on in and win the belt with a sub 500 overall record? This would be an amazing history to be made here on BTL. Who gets it done?
Your winner with barely 50% of the votes, but just one vote over, I think, is and still New York.
Oh,
Rick.
New York Rick gets it done. New York Rick gets it up by like a vote or two. Holy smokes, what a battle. What a battle.
Unbelievable. This was literally our closest battle ever. It was
a good one. I felt it. I felt the closeness.
This is a good one. AK, how do you feel? How do you feel? This is a great battle.
I feel good. I feel good. I feel I performed better in this in this loss than some of my wins, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think this effort, there we go. I think this effort would have won me a lot. I think this would have won me a lot of other ones that I lost. So I feel good about it. No complaints. No complaints. It is. It's always an honor to play with New York Rick and to lose to New York Rick.
I thought AK's record was going to be like the old DVD logo that would bounce from corner to corner, and you were just rooting for it to hit it exactly perfectly in the corner. New York Rick, congratulations on the win. I have to say, before you cut your 30-second promo here, I told Jed Meshew last week when I introduced him that you were the champion, and he thought the show just fell off a cliff when he found out that you were the champion. He did not have nice things to say about your run, New York Rick. So he'll probably be your opponent next week. Your thoughts on Jed Meshew just being negative about your championship run?
Yeah, let me just first address this week and just say what an honor it was to be here and to face Alexander. AK Lee is the best. In fact, I think that the fans, once again, throughout this entire run that I've been on, have gotten it wrong, and he deserved to win. That's unfortunate. You guys need to do better at that. Probably take a look in the mirror and see what you're doing with your lives and change that around. But the experience was still fantastic. It was great to be with you, Mike, Casey, AK. And as far as Jed, yeah, you know, he can't mean that. It comes from a place of love, and I'm just looking forward to sharing the screen and the time with him, as always, because he's such a warm individual, and he spreads that positive light, and I'm somebody who likes to do the same. So when we combine that together, only good times could be ahead. So thanks for the kind words, Jed, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Good stuff. Casey, you can hit the music. We're done. Here it comes. There it is. All right. Thank you all very much. Back next Thursday. We will recap UFC Jacksonville. We'll get you ready for UFC Vegas 76. Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov. We're on the road to International Fight Week. UFC 290 is a great card. 291 is a great card. The summer months are going to be fantastic. And hope you will join us for all of it. So for AK, for New York Rick, for Casey on the 1s and 2s, the iconic voice of Eshelin, take you home. I am Mike Heck. Back next week. Good night, everybody.
This has been Between the Links, an MMA fighting production on the Vox Media Network.